Alright, looks like we are live. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be a live video. I'm not doing anything crazy, interactive, or interesting for live stream, but I don't want to have to get all the filming equipment out and get all the microphones out for something that's not really a guide video, more of a quick how-to or how I did this. So, with that in mind, I'll just go ahead and get started. If anybody wants to join, chat's open as always, but otherwise, this will be a good recording for people to come back to later on. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to adjust one of these lights real quick so that the camera picks this up just a little bit better. Alright, this should help. Okay, so let me start off with what we have here. This is a very high flow Aeromotive fuel pump. So this is from the Aeromotive Stealth series. This is 340 liters per hour, a huge increase over the stock Festiva's 200-ish, or under 200. It's got a sleeve on it right now that is pretty well stuck to it, but you would have seen the Aeromotive stuff under there. This one is like a standard Mazda fitment, so this won't bolt directly into a Festiva Sending Unit because it is offset. However, it is very similar to the size used on the new sending units they offer on the Festiva store. So we will be modifying one of those. It also fits a OEM factory fuel sock, which is very important because you need this shape to suck up every last bit of fuel to use all 10 gallons. I also sell those on the store. The only modification needed was to cut off one of these little tabs down here. I had to grind it flat so that the little guard here would fit, but now that's on. We also have a chunk of very nice flexible fuel line. This is not standard fuel line. You would not just go to the parts store and buy this. This is J30 R10 spec SAE submersible fuel line. So this stuff can be completely submerged in fuel or E85 or diesel and be completely unaffected. It costs a lot more. This is only a foot long, and this costs like 20 bucks for this. But I needed this long, flexible piece, so don't just use regular fuel line. You need to be rated for the fuels. It needs to be rated to be submersible. So this is E85 submersible rated, and we're actually going to need that whole length for what we're doing today. The pump also came with the other side of this mate plug. Normally, you would need a plug on Festiva since they have little terminals that screw onto them. For this application, I think we're going to keep the plug. I want to be able to unplug it for servicing later if need be. We've got some nice fancy new constant pressure spring clamps. I got an AN fitting for demonstration. This is an AN bulkhead fitting. It is a 90-degree bulkhead. So this, if you're drilling a hole somewhere, you can stick this through your hole, cap it on the bottom. This has a conversion piece built in, so it goes from a 5/8 barb over to a 90-degree bend into standard AN6. And AN6 is the size fuel line I'm running for the whole build, so that's perfect for our application. That came with its crush washers and the nut needed. This pile of objects over here are for our power wires. I wanted to give a nice big beefy external power wire for this thing. So I've got 2 aluminum and 2 nylon washers that are machined to a certain size, along with a bunch of hardware, O-rings, and washers. These will penetrate through the lid of our sending unit and give us a big chunky spot to bolt down some eye bolts, or sorry, some eye terminals for some wiring. So we'll be doing that. Got those, I believe, from Racetronics. Later on, when I edit this video for like the recording, I can add links to some of the stuff I bought here. It wasn't very cheap, but I wanted to do it once and do it right. So we've got a stainless hose clamp that we're going to use to secure the pump to the sending unit itself, since it's aftermarket. And then we have a fuel pump sending unit from the Festiva store. You'll see I've made some modifications here. On this side, this is where the outlet tube normally would be. So this guy here will come out from there. I just cut it flush and then drilled straight through it. Then I have a hole down here, slightly offset on the other side. That's where we're going to have the fuel actually come out of. This hole is actually, we're going to replace it and make that where our power wire comes through. and on the back side where our ground wire comes through. Right now that hole's a bit messy. I did have to kindly cut into the sending unit some, so we're going to unbolt the sending unit. I need to make some additional clearance on this black plastic piece here, if the light will pick that up at all. So I'm going to make a little more clearance so I can fit those big washer things under this spot. And due to the way we drilled this hole, there's a bit of a shelf there. You can probably see where this edge is nice and tall from this bracket, but I need that to sit flush. So I went ahead and took a copper crush washer and trimmed the edges so that this will fit up against our metal shelf to give us a nice flat spot for our washer to, or for those sealed washers to clamp down on. And it doesn't matter that it's not sealed because there's an O-ring that goes in from the top side that seals that whole system up. That's the basics. So I'll go ahead and start modifying this. I'm going to need to cut off the old power wires, remove the old pump, remove the sending unit temporarily just to make that little clearance mark, and slap it all back together. So let's do that real quick. I think these are tiny, right? Yeah, those are like size 7. Yep. Pop those 2 nuts off. Pull this whole thing down a little bit. And now what I want to do is, while I leave it plugged in, I want to trim that little hole to be about twice as big and not damage these tiny little wires. Let's see. I think this bracket unclips, if I remember correctly. Yep, so I can just drag that whole thing down. Sorry, going off screen there. So this is actually separate from this. It clips in, you can pull it straight down. I'm going to go ahead and unclip it from the top. There we go. Now I don't really risk damaging it since it's completely free. It's just soft plastic. I should be able to use this drill bit, tacked as like a little side cutter here. Quick check, see if we ground enough off. Just gonna pop it back in. See if our little fitting goes through now. It's close. Looks like it's still touching a bit on the edge. I wouldn't mind a little more clearance than that. While I have it all apart. I want to note I am very intentionally doing this to these aftermarket Chinese units because I do not want to cut up and modify a factory Festiva sending unit. I like keeping the factory stuff factory where I can, so since I'm cutting all up anyway, it doesn't really matter which style I use since I'm going to get rid of half of the stuff that's built onto it. It's actually a much better plan for my situation to use the aftermarket one in this case. So there we go, plenty of clearance now. We can zip him back on. I was actually really fighting this whole system yesterday. I could not figure out how to get my hoses to route due to where all those not flat spots are. So I was asking some people, see if they had any ideas. And Joe King very kindly got back to me and said that he had looped some line on a previous car. And I tested that idea on this, and it looked like it was going to work pretty good. So thank you to Joe for help me out there figuring out a good plan as where to get this thing to fit. Okay, I unscrewed all the little side screws holding this assembly on for the pump that comes with these. Slides down. There it is. We are not using this power wire at all. They're too thin for our application. I'm just going to pop them off. I can save that for a different car. We do need the sender wires to work though, so I'm just going to leave those alone. Now I can clip the sender back in place. Actually, you know what? Let's leave it unclipped for a second. Let's get our nut and bolt in there and use our drill to clean up some of the edge here. Be smart. Gotta think ahead a little bit. Clean up my workstation a little bit. Not gonna need all of this for a bit yet. Those two. Okay, clean up that little hole. Beautiful. Alright, now, what I'd like to do is have the power wire come in on this back side here. I want it kind of far away from the fuel side because this one's pretty close to it. So the power wire for this setup is going to be this chunky wire here. Sorry to get my head in there. Basically, we're going to take one of our eye bolts and it's going to bolt on to this screw here. There's a washer, an O-ring, the screw. That wire's going to bolt onto that. Then it's going to go through this whole big washer assembly. You can imagine the wire still being there. This then fits perfectly in this hole with one of these O-rings down here. With the flip side, you can see it is barely sticking out there. Then you'd run the other side of this back on. Power wire on the flip side that goes to the pump itself. And then back to your O-ring setup, a washer, and this nut. You tighten all that all the way down, and you have one through bolt power. So that gives you a nice big chunky bolt to run all your wires through. That's giving you power, and since it's got a big nylon nut here, it is not hitting any of this metal. So it is completely isolated from the rest of the metal here with these O-rings and this nylon. The other screw we're going to be putting in is for the ground. You can see the ground is actually metal. It's a nice coated stainless steel, or nice zinc coated steel, I should say. Since this is ground, we actually do want to ground through the metal, so now that's going to make contact and give us a nice ground point. Just like that. So to make all that work, we can go ahead and cut and crimp some wires. We're going to have our piece here. I think earlier I was looking at this, trying to decide how I want to route all this wiring. The pump has to sit in this orientation with the sock facing back. I think I wanted to wrap the power wire on the back side like that. So now I can move it, which means this section of the wire will sit here. It'll need to come up. And it looks like our power and ground are already about the right length, so we don't need to trim anything. We can just go ahead and crimp that stuff on. That'll be these here. Go ahead and get our crimper out. Oh, hey Mike. Welcome to the chat. Sorry, I guess I didn't have it unmuted. Now it should be working as it should. Welcome. Alright, I think we're going to want this jaw set here. Actually, no, since these wires are no longer coated, we actually want the thicker jaw set. Be this set here. That's more like it. Yeah, now we're stuck on good. Same to the other side. Alright, so there's two of them. Now we do the same for our wires that go to the outside. This side is going to get joined into the main wiring harness. I'll show you how to do that later. But this side we can go ahead and prep. That's nice and strong. And one more. Got a little funky. Try him again. Much better. Fantastic. There's our wires. So now we can go ahead and do our power wire. So for that, we're going to want to have our external wire stack on there first, followed by a washer and an O-ring. Let's see if the camera wants to focus on that for a second, maybe. There we go. So terminal, washer, O-ring. This piece even has a recess for that O-ring to seal nicely. Then we're going to do this big O-ring here. All that fits straight through like so. Now, since my metal is too thin to use the back side, we're actually going to flip this around. So we need to put an O-ring on now. Same deal on that little holder. We're going to use the big fat flat side of this to hold all that down. Then we want another washer. And the ground side of this cable. And the nut. Or sorry, the positive side. What am I thinking? Nylon positive. This connector is going on this back side, so I'll go ahead and put it over here just to make this wiring a little smoother. I'll go over these. Trying to think ahead. I think I'll have to move that O-ring. I don't think it's going to work quite like that. If it doesn't seal, there's other methods to do this. But yes, right now this O-ring is causing it to not pull enough tension on the part to make it flush, to seal it. What did I drop? Hopefully nothing important. Oh, I think it was little washers. Oh, that's alright. I've got more. Let's go find one in a minute. I have to try to get this other O-ring to fit on here. Just push it down enough. This is why I don't usually do these on live. I can't edit out as I'm doing this for the first time. I did a trial run earlier with a broken sending unit, but it wasn't a very good test. I definitely messed up a few of the holes and had a lot of stuff broken on the way in. So this is the real one, I should say. But since I haven't had any practice doing the setup, yeah, I'm gonna need that O-ring on there. That feels great. And now, if I have room, I'll leave it like this. So these actually have the ability to be like double studded. So you leave a stud in there like this, and it stays there. And then to do your ground wire in and out easily, you put that on it, and then stack another nut on top of it. I was looking like I might have some clearance issues with my sending unit though, so I think I'll try to keep it down to one nut. Alright, so there's our ground. Oh, how many times am I going to put the ground on there instead of the power wire? One of these days I'll get this right. Alright, O-ring, centered. This goes on. Power wire goes on. Alright, now we can snug it up with an Allen key, a wrench. Which appears to be a tool I should have already had out. My bad. Alright, that should be plenty good. And I realized when I was doing this, I actually want to run the power wire up to the factory grommet, so I went ahead and angled it so it goes towards this loom here. Now, for our other side, we can run our ground. And again, with clearance issues, I'm actually going to run the ground the opposite direction. I'm going to have it coming out through the top. So, O-ring back in. That little assembly there. Focus. Well, seem to have completely broken the autofocus. There we go. Okay. Washer, bolt, O-ring, copper washer. Now has to come in here. Takes up our extra space. Or, sorry, this one is actually the one that gets flipped. I'm missing 2 washers and an O-ring somehow now. Pardon me, I see this on the back bench. There we go. Washer obtained. Put ground wire on. Trying to line up my copper washer now. It's being a little difficult. This is kind of the challenging part of this. The Festiva Sending Unit just has so little room to work with. There we go. Beautiful. So now we have a nice solid ground connection, a very solid power connection. Both of those coming down into here. The wires came with the pump. Just a little twist to keep it clean. Now we can fit our post back on. Another thing about these Chinese sending units is that they kind of have too much wire for the sender. Like, that's going all over the place, kind of excessive. You could totally retrim that and redo it a little bit, but I don't think I'm going to bother with all that. Okay, now we can clip this guy back in, which also means we want to turn him so he faces this way. Clip it back into this spot to hold the wires in place. You can see how close our bolt gets to interfering with our level sender. However, since the tank only goes up, gasket stuck. Since the tank can only go up to here anyway, looks like we're going to be just fine. We might go ahead and trim off a little bit of the plastic right there, just to be safe. Just a little edge of that. Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. That's going to work great. All right, move some of this stuff out of the way. Go ahead and tuck these wires, trim them a bit shorter because they only need to go halfway down this grommet. So cut them about here. Tuck them into the sleeve for now. We'll come back and do that wiring another time, but by splicing them in and replacing these two wires from the bottom, we will basically have a plug-and-play pump system, so I don't have to mess with any other connectors or weird wiring nonsense. It's just going to work like it's supposed to. There we go, just like that. Much cleaner to play with now. Next, we can go ahead and put in our actual bulkhead fitting. So we're going to want these crush washers for that. On the top side, I think we can even use this fancy rubber one they've included. Yes, very nice. Gives like a nice O-ring type seal. Then we have one crush nut here. This is going to go on this part. We want that facing towards the front of the car, which would be this way. So we can move our ground wire down a bit. Put him on here. Crush washer goes on that bulkhead fitting down there. A couple of this big nut here. So the camera decided that that's nice and dark and none of you need to see any of that. Thanks, camera. And let's make sure that clears our own harness situation here. By taking a test fitting and making sure I can actually get the screw in up here. Oh yeah, easy. Plenty of space there to screw on a fitting. So we may leave it in this orientation. Unless these pumps are backwards. I'm going to go ahead and check that real quick. It is indeed backwards on the other side, so that's great news for us. We can flip it to this orientation closer to stock and have ourselves a much easier time getting this whole thing to work. I'll grab a big wrench to tighten that down with.
Carol 2 said, "Is this for V2 or your B6D swap guide?"
This is for V2. The swap guide is not going to cover anything EFI or E85 related. V2 is going to be the only one I'm doing E85 on because it's a much larger process, tons of tuning. You can't do that with a stock ECU. Alright, so there you go. There's our AN fitting, and you can see there on the bottom the nuts tighten down if it'll get any brighter at all. But it has a barb fitting. Again, it's not quite showing up on camera. Maybe if I flood it in light, it might. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see that barb fitting. That's on the back side of the pump assembly. So now we can put our fuel pump in place. And the fuel pump sits on this side with the sock facing down.
Said, "Is the stock Festiva lines okay to run the 85 without issues, or are you converting them?"
No, you cannot use the stock lines for 85. I am doing a full AN conversion front to back. So there will be no factory line or metal line anywhere in the car. They'll all be nice race grade AN fittings. PTFE tubing, the works. Alright, so now you can see where the pump would have gone in that hole. That was now our ground wire. So we're just going to curl this tube down a little bit. I'm going to take our hose clamp and open him up. And give it a quick wipe down since this one had some grease on it. Thankfully, since this had screws in it, we have a nice spot right here to mount our hose clamp and it not move around on us. It's a very good way to use part of the old system. Now our exact depth here, we're going to play around with an actual fuel tank to make sure we have this as far down as we can get it without bumping the ground. From testing earlier, it's about just past flush with the bottom edge of this, especially when you compare it to how the pump that was on here worked. So I don't want to tighten it down completely yet. We're just going to get it close, make sure our angle's correct, then tighten that clamp down. There we go. I also like to get rid of the extra section of the hose clamp that I don't need. I don't need all that sticking out, cutting stuff up. Just gonna crease it, bend it. Just like that. Much tidier. Now I will find our hose clamp here. We're going to want to put that on ahead of time. This is the kind that has quick release, so it's going to be held in place for now. I'm just wrapping the fuel line all the way around back to that new port we installed. Over here. Now we have this big curly line coming all the way from our pump down under the sending unit and up to our output. We can go ahead and bring our clamp up top and pull the little red pin. It will clamp into place. Just like that. Now I'll hold it upright for a second. Also want to test to make sure our sending level unit has free range, and it does. Doesn't get hung up on anything. Totally clears all the components. All that's left to do is plug it in and do a little bit of cable management, which I can do with some zip ties. You know what, it might be better actually if we sneak our clamp here around the side a little bit. Like that. There's this nice flat spot to put our connector, where we have a bunch of these handy old screw holes to add a zip tie. So I'll grab one of my baby's zip ties. They should be fuel safe nylon, but we still have a good amount of time to check on that and make sure before I actually put this in the car. Actually, might even be better to go into this. And And that is pretty much it. Pull all this stuff out of the way for a second. See what we ended up with. It looks kind of crazy. It looks kind of complex. Thankfully, it really isn't. We have our factory sock point. We have our connector here. Should clear the bottom no problem. Once again, looking at it from this angle, you can see nothing hits our sender. Come over here, same deal. Nothing hits. We have full range of movement. Our hose is not held down anywhere. We're letting it sit here so it doesn't get kinked. Let's go to this side. One nice, long, smooth radius. No harsh bends here. No harsh bends here. Looks like it's close to bumping that bolt, so we might add a little protective sleeve on it right here, just to make sure it doesn't rub that. It has some vibrations in it. Filter looks fine. Up top, we have our two factory wire positions coming up. We're going to combine them into here so it plugs into the factory plug. And we have our AM thing on top, so all of our lines, I mean it's representation, but all your lines will now just screw right in. And for the return side, I actually have another one of these fittings we'll put on the tank. Since the Festiva returns through the tank, it does not return through this. That way we can have AN front to back. There you go. That is one E85 rated fuel pump, high flow. This should support, probably a good 300 horsepower on E85 to a B6T. Our goal is lower than that with the setup that I'm running right now, but it's good to know that now our fuel system can truly handle basically whatever I throw at it and still plug in and fit just like OEM. We still have the nice OEM sock that reaches all the way to the bottom of the tank. It's got the abrasion guard on it, so it should last longer than they usually do. Full sending unit stuff, full factory plug. This is fantastic stuff. So yeah, there it is. And right now, the only thing that's a little annoying is the hose sticks out past the lip of the tank. But, I mean, like I said, it's not tied down, so it's flexible. So when you go to put this in the tank, just got to push it away, drop it in, let go. It should be completely fine. Alright, so that's it for this stream. E85 pump conversion done. Next, today, I'm going to clean up the tools again, and probably around 2:30 or 3 p.m., we are going to start tearing apart the car behind me and doing an auto to manual conversion. If I whip it around real quick, we have this Festiva here, so we are going to be doing auto to manual conversion. This is the parts car, so today we're tearing that apart and then sending it away. So if you want to, feel free to join me later for that. As always, thanks you guys so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. See ya! Oh, stream reception.